Hello again. We're going to look at dot point 6.3 in this video, and I think this is probably better to do 6.3 before 6.2. So dot point 6.3 is just a comparison between electrolytic cells and galvanic cells. And if you watched my videos on 6.1, I have kind of talked about some of these differences, but I think it's worth sort of having a formal comparison of the two. And also I want to highlight what they have in common as well. So the way that you can do this is you can, and I really like these kind of diagrams. You're going to see a lot of them from me. You probably have seen a lot of them from me if I've taught you before. So it's essentially we're going to create a Venn diagram. You can make it, you can write it into your book. So you have galvanic cells on one side, electrolytic cells on another. And we're also going to look at what they have in common. So we're going to look at similarities and differences. The best way to get out of this video is to try to complete this diagram yourself and then compare it with my answers. So you can pause the video here. I'm not going to give you a timer because I don't know how long it's going to take you, but it would be very good if you could try to fill this in yourself and then continue watching. So pause here. Should have made like a meme or something. Pause, try to complete it, and then we'll come back. Okay, I assume that you have paused the video and that you have completed the diagram. If you haven't, I'm judging you from afar. But we're going to talk about the similarities and differences now. So first of all, when we talk about similarities, galvanic cells and electrolytic cells falls under the umbrella of electrochemical cells. So they both types of electrochemical cells. They both involve some sort of redox reaction, and an oil-rich cat will be true regardless of whether you're having a galvanic cell or an electrolytic cell. So if there is any acronym that you use in this topic, I say an oil-rich cat is a good one to use. So oxidation, which is loss of electrons, will happen at the anode. Reduction, which is gain of electrons, will happen at the cathode. This will never change. And I think sometimes people find electrolytic cells difficult because they just reverse every single thing from galvanic cell to electrolytic. But there are a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of things that remain constant regardless of which electrochemical cells you're looking at. So this is a similarity. Regardless of which types of electrochemical cells you're looking at, oxidation is always loss of electron, reduction is always the gain of electron, oxidation is always at the anode, and reduction is always at the cathode. And if you don't know where the letters from the acronym comes from, so oxidation is loss, that's oil, and then anode, and then reduction is gain, so rig, and then cathode. Okay. The next similarity between the two cells is the external circuit is always flow of electrons, so you always need to have some flow of electrons, and the internal circuit's flow of ions. Obviously, in an electrolytic cell, this is not a continuous flow, so you have, well, you do have one. You can have like electrons going in here, and then out of here, and then you have a power supply. Okay, so it's not a well, there is some flow in the power supply. Okay. And you always going to need two electrodes and an electrolyte, regardless of which electrochemical cells you're looking at. So that's the similarities. Those are those similarities. Do I have anything else? No, that's it. Okay, let's talk about differences. The way that you can compare these cells is when the difference is essentially one thing is the exact opposite of the other. So galvanic cells deals with spontaneous redox, which is a backward Z. So you basically have this on the electrochemical series. And in an electrolytic cell, you're looking at just a normal Z. So you're looking at this on the electrochemical series. A galvanic cell is an exothermic reaction. Energy is released in the form of electrical energy. But if you have the two oxidizing and reducing agents in direct contact, you actually will get heat released. So it is exothermic, and an electrolytic cell is actually an endothermic reaction. It requires a power supply. Similarly, this one is chemical energy to electrical energy, and electrolytic cell is the opposite. This is used to supply electricity because electrical energy is the output, whereas an electrolytic cell is used to produce chemicals. Okay, I hope some people have picked this up when I talk about electrolytic cells. One of the things that I think I mentioned so many times when we talked about galvanic cells last term is that the two reactants in the galvanic cells, so the oxidizing and reducing agents, must be separated from each other so that you can have the flow of electrons from the reducing agent to the oxidizing agent, which is your electrical energy output. In other words, you need to have two beakers or some other scheme to separate the oxidizing and reducing agents. But you don't need that in an electrolytic cell. The reactants can be in direct contact. The reason for that is because they don't react spontaneously anyway, so that you're not going to have to worry about, oh, if they come in direct contact, then you won't get electrical energy, because there isn't a spontaneous reaction between the two reactants in the electrolytic cells. I do, however, want to highlight this point is that you sometimes may have to separate the products of electrolysis because the product of electrolysis could potentially react spontaneously with each other. But we are going to talk about this point later on when we look at some specific examples of electrolytic cells. The reactants don't have to be separated because they don't react spontaneously with each other. And lastly, but definitely not least, the cathode in galvanic cell is positive, anode's negative, and this is the opposite in an electrolytic cell, and you can use the acronym PANIC if you really want to. Okay, that's it. Hopefully that gives you a better sense of where electrolytic cells comes in and what is similar, what's different, before we move on to some actual applications of electrolytic cells.